Hello, my name is Brian Lewis and I'm an instructor with J10S. Today's topic is dealing with workplace violence. Before we get started, however, what I'd like to do is ask you to pause the video and discuss any near miss and or accidents that you may have had in the past month. After you've finished, simply press play again and we will continue with our topic, dealing with workplace violence. So, what is workplace violence? Well, it's any act or threat of physical behavior. It can range from theft to robbery to full-blown terrorist attack. In fact, majority of violence in the workplace doesn't involve an active shooter. Active shooter situations do get a lot of notice in the media, popular media, but it can range from hand gestures and signs to foul language being directed in your direction, and that is considered workplace violence. So we also want to look at the categories of workplace violence, and these can be broken down into two main categories. That would be internal violence and external violence. Even though I'm getting a little ahead of myself, internal violence means violence with coworkers, either past or present. External violence, of course, comes from external sources, people in our community, in our service areas, and so forth. As I've already stated, internal workplace violence simply is violence among coworkers at the place of employment. We want to be proactive from a policy and awareness standpoint, the best way to deal with internal violence. I know in most workplaces, a little bit of teasing goes on. We need to be adults and realize that when somebody's had enough and they ask for it to stop, that it stops. This is simple but straightforward, and it's being an adult about the situation. Give everybody a wide berth when they ask for it, so to speak. External workplace violence, these are incidents that take place in and around the workplace but are committed by an outside threat. This form of violence is best controlled by using traditional security measures, and if you work in a brick and mortar building, the traditional security measures work well. However, a lot of us work out in the field, and we're going to have to work on awareness and mitigation instead of some of our more traditional measures. So keep that in mind. There are 5 sources of workplace violence, and those sources can range from criminal intent, customers or clients in our work areas, worker to worker, domestic violence, and ideological or terrorism. Criminal intent's pretty straightforward. It's unfortunate, but it's something we have to deal with in our communities. Customers and clients are irritable for various reasons. Worker to worker, we've discussed. Domestic violence is from family and spouses. Ideological, of course, can be religious, political, and in most cases, economical. So, criminal intent, theft, or vandals. That can be because people are just having fun, typically teenagers, and they like destruction of property, to people stealing anything of value. And most of the time, these people enter the workplace after hours and they take what they want and leave, and there's little threat to people. But people are bold nowadays, and they might enter the workplace with people present. That's unfortunately sort of the society we have presently. Customers or clients, violence is committed by someone who receives services in our service areas, and utilities employees are at great risk. Like I said, a lot of the people we visit work out in the field, and when you're out in the field, you have to be aware of your surroundings, aware of people and their attitudes, and sometimes, unfortunately, have to use some type of mitigation technique, which I'll cover a little bit later, to put your risk at a minimum or minimize your risk. So keep that in mind. Worker-to-worker violence. The perpetrator has an employment relationship with the workplace. A person can be a current or former employee, or in some cases, a prospective employee. Typically, these people feel they have been wronged in some way, or they've been pushed to their limits, and then they tend to get in each other's face, and that makes for an unpleasant situation. Hopefully it gets stopped before it gets to a physical situation. Remember, people usually think about what they're going to do, verbalize what they're going to do. After they verbalize it, they act out on it and or then do physical violence to someone. So that happens with worker to worker. It also happens with domestic violence. We tend to think of domestic violence being committed by a spouse or a lover, but in fact, that can happen between any one in the family or friend. I often think of Marvin Gaye and his tragic death that was initiated by his father. So it can be all kinds of family relations, right? So ideological and terrorist violence, we typically think of this as happening in larger cities, larger communities, but it can be anyone that has an ideological issue, religious, political, any kind of social, economic kind of stance, and they feel that they want basically attention for that stance. And so we can't disregard this type of violence, and we need to be aware as much as we can be about people and our situations that can create that. Now, which of these are you most likely or more likely to encounter? Well, all 5 of them need to occupy a space in our mind, but we do need to make a list, at least informally in our mind, and say, hey, which one of these am I most likely to encounter? And most of the time, for utility employees, it's going to be out in public, and members of the public that maybe are already irritated or have issues with government and or utility workers. So keep that in mind. Any information you can have or that you share about people or places or things is helpful. You need to know if you're going to be around a troubled person, their area, watch for odd behavior, people doing odd things, and evaluate your conversations. A lot of times, instead of speaking loudly and returning the energy that a person has when they're yelling and using foul language, you can, in fact, slow down, lower your voice, and reduce the amount of energy in the conversation. You also do not want to have people, or you don't want to let people to have access. So you can do a tactical retreat and stay out of a person's swinging radius or the radius where they have access to you. Pay attention to the intention on their face, their eyes, their aggressive posture, the language, loud volume. And if you have any history, consider that. Tactically retreat if need be. I cannot emphasize that enough. Do not allow them to have access to you. And also make sure you know where their hands are. That's one of the reasons you want to do a tactical retreat and not be within reach. Do not let them be able to touch you. If you need to, it's always a nice policy to have a code word. If you're not in a building where you can hit a panic button and you have access to a radio, you can transmit information easily. People on your work crew have access to cell phones, and you need to provide a minimum of information in a clear and concise manner to people that can respond. Make sure you know that. Know your utilities policy. Observe and stay aware of your surroundings. Be ready to protect yourself. And I don't mean respond to aggression with aggression, but learn to tactically retreat. Learn to use a calming nature and voice and a lower voice to take energy out of the conversation. Remember, we live in an era of smartphones where people basically have movie cameras with them all the time. And you can be absolutely in the right, but if they capture 5 minutes of you doing something wrong and put it out on social media, they can do a lot of injury to your reputation as well as the utility or city or whoever you work with. I appreciate your attention. If you have any questions, contact your JTNS instructor, and we will do our best to answer any of them. We don't know everything, but we are willing to do some research and look up information for you and make sure that you have what you need. Thank you once again. Have a great day. Bye.